Today we're going to be rounding out the year, talking about getting the most business value for our cybersecurity spending. Excuse me. We do have our speaker today is Kip Boyle. He's an author, instructor, podcast host, and he's also the Chief Information Security Officer over at Cyber Risk Opportunities. And he'll, has a lot of insight to give us today. One of the things I do want to point out is that everybody who's at our meeting today or registered will get a copy of Kip's Amazon bestseller, Fire Doesn't Innovate. It's the executive's practical guide to thriving in the face of an evolving cyber risk. It is free to us. It can be offered in a number of different venues, hard copy, digital copy, whatnot. And we'll give you information on how you can reach out to Lisa and or Kip to get your copy. Anyway, I'm going to introduce Kip, and Kip, take it away.
Oh, thank you very much. I wanted to just verify that my audio and my video and my screen share is working all right.
Yep, I see it. Yep, I see it. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, listen, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today during your meeting. I really appreciate it, especially at the end of the year. And I'm sure a lot of people are tired, ready for a break. And so, we're going to record this and we're going to put it on YouTube so that if somebody is already taking their break, they can, watch this on a replay. So what I want to do is share some information with you about the business value of cybersecurity. Then what I'd like to do is go into a question and answer session, and I'm going to leave as much time available for that as I can. And then as we go along, if you come up with a question, I would encourage you to put it in chat, just like Adriana has already put in there. Just put a question in chat, and then when we get to Q&A, then we'll start going through your questions in the order that they popped in there. So hope that's going to work for you all. But let me start with a question for you. This is rhetorical, so you can just think about it, right? How many of you know that your IT guy or gal isn't your cybersecurity guy or gal? And think about that for a moment. And if you've never thought that before, then, and if this is the first time you've ever, that anybody's ever suggested that your IT people are not your cybersecurity people, well, it's true, they're not. And as we go along today in the material that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to explain why that's the case. But don't worry, it's not that I don't like IT people. I think IT people are absolutely necessary. But I also know from my experience that we expect too much from them. And then we get disappointed when we don't get it. And I'm going to unpack that. So currently, I work as a Chief Information Security Officer to a number of different companies. Some people call that a virtual CISO. Some people say it's more like a fractional role, however you like to characterize it, but that's what we do. So the company that I founded in 2015 is called Cyber Risk Opportunities. And so I'm the owner, and we have a team of people, including Lisa Shaw, who's here today. Lisa's our executive director, and her primary focus is making sure that we as a group, because we've got a team of people, that we're taking care of our customers in the way that they've asked us to take care of them. And so that's kind of how I come to you now as a practitioner who teaches. Before I launched my own company, I was the Chief Information Security Officer of PEMCO Insurance for 7 years. And I'll mention that again. This is actually an experience that was very formative to the work that I do today. PEMCO is a personal lines property and casualty insurance company based in Seattle, which is where I live. I started working in cybersecurity back in 1992, back before You Got Mail ever entered into the public consciousness, because AOL wasn't a thing yet. And I did this while I was on active duty in the Air Force. And for the F-22, my job was Director of Enterprise Network Security. And I like to put a picture of F-22 up here because a point that I would like to make, which is everybody seems to think that F-22 is an airplane, but really it's a computer that happens to have wings attached to it because it has over 1 million lines of code that are embedded in the computer system that controls everything. And the F-22 has this really crazy shape, and it's so aerodynamically unstable in order to be low observable to radar that without computer assistance, a pilot actually can't get it off the ground. So even back, when F-22 was conceived in the 1980s, we were already starting to think about how can we, put technology into things, and how can we make those things better because of that. And so, and obviously, we've continued in that way. This is going to be a little wild ride because I'm going to share a lot of things with you in kind of a hard-hitting fashion, which is why I suggested that if you have questions, just go drop them into the chat. I'm going to try to make this a kind of a fast, exciting ride about the business value of cybersecurity. What you're looking at here is the one of the buildings for the city of Portland, Oregon. And just this past spring, cyber criminals made off with $1.4 million in taxpayer money, and it was the single biggest theft of funds in the history of the city. What's interesting about this story, and of course, you've heard a lot of stories like this, I'm sure, by now, but what's interesting is that before the money was lost, the city treasurer actually said, hey, I don't think we should be sending this money. I don't believe that this is a valid transaction. I think this is an attempt to defraud us. Unfortunately, the people who moved the money did not pay attention to the treasurer's warning, which was really unfortunate because they could have avoided this loss if they had just paid attention to what somebody was saying. Now, I tell this story because I want you to realize that I think financial people have a big role to play in cyber risk management, and I'm going to unpack why I think that's the case. Other than this story, I really applaud the treasurer for doing their very best to get people to pay attention to them and to slow down and make sure that this payment is legit. What's really awful about this fraud was that this payment was intended to go to a local nonprofit that was building 100 units of affordable housing, and but they ended up losing that payment, and what an embarrassing and awful situation. So let's say you're the chief financial officer of your organization, and many of you either are now or expect to be, or maybe you've got that behind you and now you're working as a consultant. But if you could imagine looking at your company's budget for the next year, 2023, and kind of going down the lines, and you see the cybersecurity number, and it's big. It's bigger than last year, and it's even bigger than the year before, and you're probably looking at it going, what do we get for all this money that, and with the amount continuing to go up and up and up. And you're probably asking yourself, do we really need to spend all of this on this cybersecurity stuff that I don't really understand, that nobody really seems to understand? And you even start to think about all the different ways that you could use this money to grow your business, to be more profitable, and so forth, right? But you don't really know what's the alternative, right? Because you've seen the news headlines, this is the big deal, but you just don't understand, how to talk about this with your cybersecurity leader or with your IT leader, because you don't understand a word they say most of the time about anything, because they're talking in ones and zeros. And so you're just like, what do I do? So probably like a lot of finance leaders that I speak with, you just take a deep breath and you just go, okay, I guess we just have to do this. Now, I want to do a little thought exercise with you. Let's say you go home, you eat dinner, you're trying to relax, you go to sleep. That night you have this dream, it's really vivid. And in your dream, you buy this fast new car. Now, I don't know how many of you would like to drive a fast car. Maybe you already have a really great fast car that you kind of take out to the back roads. But just think about having a really fast car. Think about sitting behind the wheel and starting it up and pulling away from the curb. And it's a lot of fun because it makes that great, powerful car noise, and you're starting to go fast. And as you get your car up to this, really crazy speed, and it's a lot of fun, it's like being on a roller coaster, you realize that you have no brake pedal and that there's really no brake of any kind in this car. There's really no way to stop this car whenever you want to. All you can do is just release the accelerator and wait for the car to stop all on its own. Now, if this was a dream, I would say it's probably turned into a nightmare. And so I want to ask you this question. In real life, how fast would you actually drive a car like this? Could you see yourself getting into a car with no brakes and not only trying to go fast, but I mean, really, would you dare to drive it at all? And I hope you can see where I'm going with this metaphor, which is brakes don't slow you down. Really, brakes let you go fast, right? I hope that makes sense. In fact, I would say that a good set of high performance brakes is really the thing that makes you feel confident that you can drive fast, because you can take a lot of risk. And then when you're done taking risk, you can just release the accelerator, step on the brake pedal, and the risk just evaporates as the car slows down just by stepping on the brake pedal. And you've got to maintain brakes. You have to make sure that they're the correct brakes and so on and so forth. Replace them every now and then. So I think cybersecurity is like this. Sometimes the thing that helps us slow down, or that helps us slow down, is actually there to help us go faster. And so I tell you this because I'm going to be sharing with you lots of examples from the real world where somebody either had brakes, great cyber risk management brakes, and they were able to use them to save their business from something awful that happened, or they didn't have good brakes and they just crashed and burned because they had no way to stop. And my vision for you is I want you to have great brakes, because cyber criminals and cyber soldiers are constantly evolving their attacks. They're not just sitting still. They're constantly figuring out new ways to mess with us. And that means we have to constantly evolve our defenses. It's almost like, if the brakes on our cars suddenly found, or if the wheels on our cars suddenly found new ways to not stop when we asked them to, and we had to change different types of materials that we made brakes out of, or a different technology of brakes. And now that would be a really tough world to live in. And that's one of the reasons why the world that we live in right now digitally is pretty tough, because of all this innovation. And what makes our situation even worse is the fact that the military, law enforcement, our government, all the institutions that have protected us in the past from all kinds of different crime, and if it hasn't been able to prevent crime, it held people accountable, they're absolutely impotent, outgunned by cyber criminals. And I think it's going to be that way for quite some time, probably 10 or 15 more years before we really get a handle on the root cause of all this cybercrime and actually dealing with it in a productive way. Anytime you see a headline these days where somebody's been arrested because the FBI figured out, so-and-so committed a cybercrime, it's almost always the result of years of effort and heroics rather than a systematized approach. And so, unfortunately, that's what's going on, and that's why your budgets are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, cyber risk is not just all downside. It's actually there's actually opportunities in it, right? And that's why I named my business Cyber Risk Opportunities, because I wanted people to know that it's not just awfulness here. You can actually do some good things for your business to make yourselves a little bit more competitive, right? So the theme here is slow down to go fast. Okay. Now you're already doing this. That's what the money that you're spending on is doing for you. So, for example, if you didn't have spam filtering, how would you know which emails you should read? You would have to manually sort through thousands of messages in order to try to identify the ones that really deserve your attention. And if you didn't put passwords on your computers and on your file shares, then how would you keep people away from sensitive data who shouldn't see it, like your unpublished financials and your payroll records, your trade secrets, and that sort of thing, right? So we already accept a certain amount of slowness in order to go fast. And so I would encourage you to magnify that perspective. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you more ways that you can slow down and go fast and create tangible business value from the money that you're already spending. So if you're thinking about, digital transformation or whatever your initiatives are, they're probably going to involve technology. And so you're going to have to face this risk. Now, I told you that when I worked at PEMCO Insurance, that was a very formative experience for what I'm sharing with you today. And what happened was a couple of years after starting and working there, the CFO reached out and said, "Hey, Kip, I would like to talk to you about your budget." And so I said, Sure, Steve, let me come over and we'll chat. And so, he was asking me the questions that I kind of shared with you already, which is like, what's with all the money? And he said, "Don't worry, I'm going to support you." But he goes, "Look, $25,000 for your budget for some new cybersecurity thing I don't understand. I've got other people in marketing that are asking me, hey, can we have $25,000 to run a new campaign to increase top line revenue? And I've got somebody from sales that are saying, hey, I want to hire some people to increase our outbound sales by or our outbound calls by 5%, right?" And so Steve is telling me like, hey, those are really compelling proposals that I can understand. What I don't know how to do is tell people what we're getting for the money that we're spending on cybersecurity. So Steve invited me to work with him to figure this out. And our first conversations weren't that productive because I was probably talking ones and zeros, and he didn't know how to talk to me back in a way that I could understand. But we kept at it and we worked together for a couple of years, and we sorted it out. And I'm just really delighted to be able to share with you, what I was able to learn from that experience. Now, the unfortunate thing is that most people, when they think about cybersecurity, they think about these long, sweaty lines that they stand in at the airport, and I stand in them too. And it's unfortunate because it doesn't have to be this way, right? It doesn't have to be about expensive overhead that nobody understands or theater, right? Because a lot of security really is just theatrical in the sense that it's there to help people feel safe, but maybe it's not actually, doing anything more than that. So I want to, if you feel like this is what's going on in your organization, I hope that these things that we talk about today are going to allow you to really dig in and figure out if that's what's going on, that it's all theater, or if there's something real here, if there's something tangible, some real business value. That's what I'd like for you. So I've got this model that I've put on the screen here, and it's a 4-dimensional model that I use to help people figure out how to go slow to go fast in cybersecurity, and to figure out like, where can we get business value for the money that we're spending. And the other thing here that I think is very helpful is that you have infinite cyber risk that's coming at you. Everybody has that, but you have a finite budget that you need to spend to deal with it. And lots of people ask me, well, where do I start? Do I just pay attention to what the vendors are saying? Do I just do what Microsoft says? Or, do I follow the headlines and just read, what's in the news? And should that be what I follow? And I actually think those are both bad ideas because they're all biased. The news media wants to tell you about sensational things that'll make you watch their reports and read their newspapers, and vendors want to sell you stuff, of course. And I'm a vendor, but I don't sell any products. But people who are trying to sell products, right, obviously have their own bias towards something that they can actually sell, which makes sense, right, from their point of view. But it's not necessarily your top cyber risk, what they're selling. And so that's what we try to do, is use this business value model to help identify, what really is your top cyber risk. Now, my book, Fire Doesn't Innovate, really explains this model in great detail. So I'm not going to unpack it thoroughly during our conversation today, but I encourage you to get a free copy of my book in whatever format you like to read books. There's even an audio version of the book if you like to listen to podcasts. Then listening to my book that way could be the way to get through it. So. But I do want to tell you a little bit about these 4 dimensions. So there's increased operational reliability, and that's kind of in the upper left-hand corner. I can tell you that it's at about the 11 o'clock position. My little kids don't get that because they don't know how to read, a clock with hands. It's so funny. They're not really learning that these days, and all the clocks they look at are digital. But anyway, so you got increased reliability of operations. Over at the 1 o'clock position, upper right, you've got financial returns. Lower right, you've got technical risk mitigation, which is what a lot of people really think about when they talk about cybersecurity. And of course, there's a business value being created there. But there's also legal risk mitigation, and a lot of people think about that as compliance. So sure, those bottom 2 dimensions are probably familiar to you, but the top 2 dimensions, I don't know. But I want to give you a specific example from each area, all right? So normally you'd think that a new control at the desktop level would be a productivity killer. And quite frankly, they are a lot of the times. But a password manager is one of those rare things that comes along that gives you more security and greater productivity. And if you've never thought about it, well, security's increased, of course, because password managers help you make strong, unique passwords for every website that you use, which is what you need to be doing in order to stay safe. But it's also going to increase productivity because now members of your workforce don't have to remember multiple different passwords, and they don't have to struggle to create new passwords when their old ones expire, because the password manager will do that for them. And they don't have to tediously type in their user IDs and passwords, because the password manager will put those in for them. All they have to do is remember a single strong passphrase to unlock their password vault. And they just do that once in the morning, and then they're off to the races. So there is a little speed bump when you roll out the password manager, right? Because people have to learn how to use it and maybe make some tweaks to their workflow. But that's okay, because you're going to tell them, look, I know this is going to cause you to go a little bit slow right now, but it's going to make you go fast once you get the hang of this, right? You're going to go faster than you've ever gone before. So that's an example of financial return. For the technical risk mitigation, I want to tell you a story about this very big company called Norsk Hydro, which is in Scandinavia. And in March of 2019, they had a huge ransomware attack, and it shut down their entire aluminum production capacity in plants they had all over the world. And they actually had to go back to pen and paper for more than a week because they had no ability to use any of their computers. All of it was locked and unavailable to them. Now, when they restarted their operations, eventually they got control. They returned control back to themselves, but they had an 82% drop in first quarter profits as a result of this attack, and their direct costs were about $71 million in order to deal with this. Right, that's how much money they had to actually spend. So it was really awful. And I think, using my metaphor, you could say, well, Norsk Hydro went driving with really fast without a good set of cyber brakes. They went so fast that they couldn't slow down and contain a ransomware attack when it popped up, and the thing just ran amok everywhere. So they kind of came to a sudden and tragic stop, right? So where's the business value in this, Kip? So far, it's just a tale of woe. Well, the business value for them came in the recovery, because they realized that they were in a bad situation, and they also realized that if they could do a great job of communicating publicly about what had happened to them and about the recovery that they were going through, that they could actually increase their reputation as being a resilient company, even though they didn't do such a hot job of keeping that cybersecurity problem from shutting them down. And that's exactly what happened to them. So they enhanced their brand, and they are now seen as a trustworthy, resilient organization. And in fact, you can go out to YouTube and you can search for them, and you'll find videos of various news organizations that covered them, not focusing on what happened to them that was bad, but really focusing on what a masterful job they did at recovering. And even Microsoft wrote this very extensive case study of how they recovered themselves. So they slowed down to go fast in their recovery, which is great. And what's even more powerful is when you can continue to serve customers when your competitors can't. And so that means you've got to figure out a way to become a smaller target. I don't think the answer to the problems that we have today of being outgunned is to have perfect security or anything like it. That's really not possible, perfect security. What I really encourage people to do is just become a smaller target, right? Don't be a B-2 bomber on the radar screen of the cyber attackers, right? Be an F-22, which is just this little pinpoint on the radar screen rather than this big blob, and which lets them really target you and exploit you. So let's talk about increased reliability of operations. So one of the best stories that I can share with you happened in 2017, and that was the year that this data wiper, this worm, if you will, went across the world, and it's called NotPetya, and it caused about $10 billion of damage. And this is in 2017. This is all public record. In Europe, there were two small package delivery companies, one called TNT Express and one called DHL. Now, TNT Express is actually owned by FedEx. They had just recently acquired them. And both of these organizations got hit with this data wiper malware, which actually came from a cyber battle that was going on in Ukraine, where Russia was attacking Ukraine. And so here you've got two organizations that were caught in the crossfire in a cyber battle. Now, TNT got hit and they suffered a massive slowdown in their worldwide operations, and that went on for weeks. Their staff didn't know where the shipments were that they'd already had in their possession. They had thousands of customers that wanted to ship something that couldn't. They couldn't deliver any of the things that they had. And in an earnings call a few months later, FedEx CEO Fred Smith actually said in the call, had it not been that TNT was a subsidiary of FedEx, the company would have been bankrupt because of this awful malware. So that's what happened to TNT Express. But their competitor, DHL, totally different story. They got hit by NotPetya, but they didn't suffer the same way TNT did. They actually continued to accept and deliver packages. And if you look at the financial results of these two organizations, and they do report the results publicly, so it's easy to see this. DHL's revenue went up. Their package volume went up. Their profitability went up. And that happened for many, many quarters. But TNT, FedEx, it was the total opposite. Revenue down, profit down, volume down. And not because DHL ran a special or a marketing campaign. They just stayed open when their competitor couldn't. And that resulted in them getting this amazing change of loyalty from a bunch of people who maybe would have never changed, maybe never would have stopped using TNT Express. So again, we can see an example where DHL slowed down to go fast, and they continue to outpace TNT's performance, even several years later. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about this last dimension, this legal risk mitigation dimension. And what we're seeing is that increasingly the sales process that a lot of customers of ours are going through includes negotiation on data security and privacy. This happens in a lot of situations. We see a lot of fintechs that are selling to big insurance companies, banks, financial institutions, and you've got these little technology companies taking possession of a lot of sensitive data. And so, of course, the large insurance companies and banks want to make sure that that information is being protected. And so there's a lot of business-to-business supply chain pressure to get your data security addendums negotiated and signed and implemented, right? And it makes sense. There's a lot of third-party cyber risk management that's going on right there. And here we are in the era of GDPR. California is continuing to pass revised GDPR-like legislation. And so, of course, the insurance companies and the financial institutions and the healthcare institutions are very concerned that their trusted outside partners are doing a good job of guarding this data. But it's difficult for suppliers to understand what it is that is being asked in these data security addendums. And so what we tell them to do is like, hey, don't just sign it. God, no, don't just sign it. And don't say you're not going to do anything, because that's not going to get you to the deal either. Rather, let's go ahead and go through it together, and let's just slow down and see what's in this thing. And let's sort out what you can reasonably do, what you can't reasonably do, and then, what can we negotiate? What's in the middle there. And so because they slow down and really pay attention to these data security addendums, they go actually much faster, because it reduces their pre-sales effort on these security conversations by about 80%. And they're closing deals about 30 days faster than what they used to. I'm thinking about one customer of ours in particular. And so it's really been a wonderful business enabler. There's a lot of business value in them looking at the data security addendums and rolling up the sleeves and really getting in there. Now, it's gone so well that the CEO actually thinks of their cybersecurity team not as overhead, but as sales enablement. And talk about business value. That's some really, really great business value when you can get there. And they do all of this while they're actually managing their cyber risks, which is fantastic. So I hope you can see that they're actually squeezing a lot of business value out of the money that they're spending. So I hope you can see that cyber isn't really just some obscure, annoying technical risk. It has been in the past, right? For those of us who've been around for a while, we remember a time when just buying a copy of Norton Antivirus, putting it on a computer, making sure that it stays updated, that's really all we needed to do. I mean, that was the easy button. But because of where we're at right now, the evolving nature of cyber risk, there really isn't any easy button anymore that's within reach. The only easy button I know of is don't use the internet. And that's not realistic, is it? So we have to continue to use technology in our businesses. In fact, I want to tell you a quick story about a company that catches tuna in the South Pacific, and they process it, put it in cans, and they send it to grocery stores. And they came to us because they were trying to renew their cyber insurance, and they were not given a quote that they considered to be economic. And so they said, well, we're going to self-insure for cyber. And they asked their broker, who can help us with that. So we were talking with them about that. And I asked one of the people we were speaking with, hey, I'm curious, can you actually take a tuna out of the sea, put it in a can and get it to a grocery store if you don't have your computers? And it took him a moment to think about that, because I don't think he'd ever really thought about it that way. But he came to the conclusion pretty quickly that they could not actually do that. And so I said, well, it's really important that you recognize that you're a technology company that happens to focus on catching seafood and putting it on grocery store shelves, because right now you're thinking of yourselves as an aquatic agriculture firm that just has a bunch of pesky computers around that are always causing trouble. And that's not really a mindset that's going to help you. So cyber is really a general business risk, right? And it's just as serious as risks to your ability to sell the products or the services that you offer, to fulfill the orders that you receive, and to collect the money that's owed to you, or even to have the money that you already have collected to be stolen from you through some clever email scam. And what we're seeing is that cyber failures due to ransomware, for example, can put a halt to all that, right? It can keep you from doing any of the critical business functions that you need to do in order to book revenue and be profitable. And I want to give you an example. So there's a company called Colorado Timberline, or although I should say there was, because they're not in business anymore. And they were $100 million a year manufacturing company, and they went out of business in 2018 because they had a ransomware attack. And I grabbed a couple of screenshots here. As you can see, I went to Google Maps because when I read the story about it, I was really curious to learn a little bit more about where were they. And you can see right here, Google Maps acknowledged that they were closed. And then I went on to Facebook to try to see if any announcements had been made there. And I found, yes, in fact, a lot of there was a lot of conversation on Facebook, and then ultimately I found this particular one here where they admit that they've been crushed through a bunch of cyber attacks, and it has actually put them out of business. And it's really awful because people who were counting on them to serve them never got their money back, never got the things they ordered from them. And later on, we actually watched as their hard assets went onto the auction block. We actually could see all their hard equipment photographed and available to be bid on about 6 months later. So, and I think about all the people there who their careers came to an end, or they were just suddenly jobless, and they had to go figure out, how do I feed my family now? How do I support my family? How do I achieve my goals in life? Because these cyber attackers put my employer out of business, which we think that's awful. We think it's not right that American businesses should be attacked and destroyed like that by nameless, faceless, amoral people in other parts of the world. And that's really a lot of the passion that we feel for why we do our work. But anyway, so again, what's the goal? The goal is not perfect security. It's not world-class security. It's just be a more difficult target. If you've ever seen this product here called the Club, well, you could see what it does, right? You put it on your steering wheel, and it makes it difficult for a thief to steal your car. And it's not that the Club can't be defeated, because I can give you 3 ways to defeat it. It's just that it slows the thief down, and it increases the chance they're going to get caught. They're going to have to carry special equipment if they want to defeat this thing. And so they're just going to move on to a different car. This is because it's going to be easier to steal. And so that's what I mean when I say I want you to become a more difficult target. And you can do that actually in a very affordable way. Is I want you to remember this screen grab, right, of Scarface. It's like Scarface doesn't have an M16, but has actually picked up a keyboard and is now coming after us. And I don't think that's an unreasonable way to think about this. The criminals have actually borrowed our business models, and they are actually out there working in well-lit spaces. They actually have payrolls. They have people that come to the office every day. And so they're really scaling, their operation. Okay, so I told you that in the beginning that there's a difference between IT and cybersecurity, and I know on the surface they look the same, but they're really not, because the people that do IT versus cybersecurity, they have similar skill sets, but they have very different goals, and they have very different ways of thinking, right? So the IT goal is to keep systems running, whatever it takes. And we know that, because that's kind of what we complain about, is when a system's unavailable, where are those IT people? We got to get the system back up and running again. So that's kind of what happens, is they get beat up when systems go down. And so that's kind of all they pay attention to. And the kind of cybersecurity controls, the breaks, right? They just see that as kind of interfering with their work. And so they're really not that interested in it. They really only do it with a certain amount of reluctance. But by being very open in the way they design systems, which they hope is going to let them be up a lot, actually is the root cause of a lot of the bad things that we're seeing today. So this idea of building systems and keeping them open is an old strategy for keeping them up and running. And these days, that whole approach isn't really working anymore. The more open you keep your systems, actually, the more easy it is to attack them and to actually take them down. Now, people like me want to keep systems from being violated, and so when they're built in a very open way, we actually get twitchy, and so there's some tension there, right, between us cybersecurity people who want to put some controls in there to keep these systems from being exploited, and the people who are building them, whose big goal is to keep them running. And I thought I would show you just a screen grab here. On the right hand side, this is a ransom note that I just held up my mobile phone and took a picture of it on a computer when we were called one time to help a customer deal with the fact that they had just lost control of all their computers. They were a mortgage broker, and and their IT people just did not understand what was going on. They didn't know what to do, and so they needed some help. And it was an awful situation because they were a privately held mortgage broker started by a husband and wife team that came to the United States. They immigrated here to pursue their dream, their legacy for their family. And then something like this happens, and it just took all the wind out of their sails and really threatened the viability of their business. And so I don't want that for you. I don't want that for any of you and the organizations that you work at. This is a really terrible thing to have happen. And it doesn't just happen to people in the financial services. It actually happens to people in manufacturing, and it happens to big organizations and small organizations. So everyone's really a target is what I want to that's the point that I want to make. So as I wrap up, I want to talk just a little bit about the Chief Information Security Officer. Like what exactly is that role? Because there's actually two different types of CISOs out there, and I want you to be aware of that. If you ever want to call on the services of a CISO on a part-time basis. So there's the CTO mindset, and this is where this is kind of old way of thinking, where they see cybersecurity as a technology issue, and they tend to approach the work in a very tech-heavy or tech-exclusive way, as opposed to the Chief Operating Officer mindset, which sees cybersecurity as a business issue. And I think this is kind of where I'm at. Although I have to admit, when I first started doing this work, I was kind of in the more of the CTO way of thinking. But if you can, if you're ready to tackle cybersecurity as a business issue, I think you're going to want more of the COO mindset person working with you, and they're going to help you actually take a more business focus, right? So I like to think about, what happens in the order to cash process, for my customers, and what are all the dependencies there, and where are all the assets? So order to cash, purchase to pay, hire to retire, record to report. We'd like to dig into this stuff because we think that's where all the real interesting issues are, the kind of issues that can actually stop you. We focus on people, process and procedure. When we think about how to make you a more difficult target, company policy, and of course technology, because that absolutely plays a role in what's going on. Okay, so I hope I've given you a pretty good understanding of what modern cyber risk is about, and how to get the most business value for the money that you're spending. So as I wrap up and transition to Q&A time, again, I want to reemphasize that we're happy to share with you a free copy of Fire Doesn't Innovate. I see Lisa has put her email address in the chat, so you hopefully you can copy that out of there, and just let her know what version of the book you'd like, and we'll get that over to you. If you like podcasts, I'm actually the co-host of the Cyber Risk Management Podcast, and I do this podcast with a cybersecurity and privacy lawyer named Jake Bernstein, and we've just released episode 121. Which means we've been doing this for about 5 years now. We release every other week. And you can see the URL on the slide there. It ends with 112. If you're going to check out the podcast, I'm going to suggest episode 112 would be a great episode for you to try out. And that one's called How to Work with CFOs on Cyber Risk Management. So hopefully that would be of interest. And we're in all the directories, Apple, Google, Stitcher, and so forth. If you'd like to get a note from me every other week on what's happening in the world of cyber risk as a business risk, then you can go to our website and you can sign up. And it's about 500 words, takes 5 or 6 minutes to read. Very easy to unsubscribe if you don't want to get it anymore. But that's another free resource that we offer. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is just open it up for any questions that you have. I'd love to know what's on your mind. Feel free to show me a red card if you think I've gotten this all wrong.
Yeah, Kip.
Any questions from the group?
Well, I guess I have a question. As you were talking, I was thinking about, what you were saying about business value.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been seeing a lot of things happening, different things in the cybersecurity insurance space.
Right.
And I think maybe some of the folks here, they've been involved in that process of looking at getting cybersecurity insurance for their companies or getting it. And maybe they've seen some differences too now compared to other years. And I think that is a place where cybersecurity can bring significant business value. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I think cyber insurance is a really important tool in the cyber risk management toolkit. It is more difficult to get than it has been in the past, but that's because, again, the cyber criminals are getting way more sophisticated, and it's causing insurance companies to spend a lot of money to cover the promises that they made to their insureds. Having said that, you can still get cyber insurance, and I think it's important because, again, because cyber criminals are innovating, and you're doing your best to be a difficult target. However, you can still have something awful happen to you because it's very difficult for us to anticipate everything and anything that a cyber criminal might do in order to exploit us. And so cyber insurance is very helpful because that is a real risk. No matter how small of a target you try to make yourself, something awful could still happen. The trick to getting cyber insurance these days is to pay very careful attention to the subjectivities, which is to say, what are the things that insurance companies are going to require you to be doing, and then to get those in place and to keep up with them. And there's actually a lot of value in that. Cyber insurance is a lot like fire insurance in the sense that 150 years ago, when fire insurance, was really starting to be something that people could buy, nobody really knew, well, how do we keep buildings from burning down? Like, nobody knew about fire-resistant materials. Nobody knew about well-funded municipal fire departments, building sprinklers, fire hydrants, conducting fire drills, getting people to actually practice getting out of the building quickly. We've learned how to do those things over time because insurance companies sharpened their pencils, and they actually figured out like what really reduces the risk of a fire. And they started requiring those things. And that's exactly the arc of maturation that cyber insurance is going through right now. And so I think that's a real key to getting cyber insurance, is getting on board with that program. And I think that can be very helpful. Even if you can't get cyber insurance or you don't want to get cyber insurance, it's very helpful to know what they're requiring, because they've got billions and billions of dollars at risk. They've got to get this right. They have to know what actually reduces the risk of a cyber claim. And so that's actually some really helpful information.
So Kip, if I could jump in on that topic, because it was sort of on my mind of late. The requirements, how does one prove it, right? In other words, at the end of, when the crisis occurs, you'll say, okay, where's my check? And they'll say, well, how do I know you were doing, you had the fire extinguisher and the ladder outside the window?
Right. So the way that works is, first of all, they will have you fill out their application. They'll ask you very specific questions, and they'll have you sign the application. Now, it's illegal to lie on an insurance application, and so they're relying on using that as a way of cutting down people's temptation to misrepresent what they're actually doing. But where they will really catch up with you, though, is if you actually file a claim, and if the claim's big enough, well, they're going to send digital forensics investigators into your company, your organization, in order to find out how did the cyber criminal get in and exploit you. And in the process of doing that, they're going to be able to know whether you did the things that you said you did on the application. Now, it's not likely, because I haven't heard any stories of anybody being referred for prosecution for lying on their application. But what they are likely to do, and I have heard about this, is that they'll just say, you misrepresented yourself on the application. Here's your premium back. Your policy is null and void. and now you don't have coverage when you need it the most. So that seems to be their current approach on, how do they know that you're doing the things that you say you're doing?
Thank you.
Hi, Kip. My name is Bharti. I'm actually working in the business value consulting team of a cybersecurity firm, and what you said resonated really well because I do that on a day-to-day basis.
Great.
Sometimes I find that when the message goes to CIOs beyond the CISO, because aspects of cybersecurity spend are beyond, there are aspects which are beyond the CISO. CIOs sometimes consider risk mitigation as a soft benefit, right? Like they are thinking about what is my hard benefit, how much efficiencies do I gain, how much will I save in terms of point products versus a single product,
Sure.
and stuff like that.
Sure.
I feel like what you were describing earlier in the CIO versus CO mentality is exactly what I felt. Like they're thinking of it as a technology spend versus a business spend.
Right.
How do you turn the conversation when you are with the CIO like this, with the CIO mentality, and help them think about more on the business side and why risk is important?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very insightful question. Well, I find that most CIOs are already getting a lot of pressure from other members of the C-suite to be more business-minded. So they know, right? The ones that are not being more business-minded, they know they should be, but they're struggling to be, somehow. And so usually there's already an appetite. What's missing is a vocabulary and a framework or some kind of a model, right, for them to grab onto. And so a lot of times my book is very helpful, and sometimes it's just a series of conversations that I can have with them. Sometimes I just have to walk them through the business value model that I shared with you today, and that they just need to spend some time getting more familiar with it. It's really a shift in mindset. More than anything else. But I think vocabulary and tools and frameworks are very helpful because that's how the mind shift can persist over time.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thanks for being here.
Are we okay for time? Are we good for time? A few more
We have
minutes.
a few minutes left. Yeah.
Okay, Kip, I know in our work, what we see so often, and I wonder if you could talk about this a little bit, is where maybe the cybersecurity department, is concerned about cybersecurity, and, the C-suite is concerned about cybersecurity, but there's this broken bridge in between the workforce and the cybersecurity team. Almost where the workforce thinks, well, cybersecurity takes care of cybersecurity.
Or IT does.
Or IT does. Yes. I mean, we hear that and see that all the time.
Yeah.
So, if some of these folks are in that situation where maybe they're concerned about cybersecurity and their other, their C-suite, the rest of the C-suite is, how do they repair that bridge? How do they?
Yeah, that's great. We do see that a lot, right? There's this communications chasm, and I think it's just sticking with your metaphor about a bridge. I think it's less about repairing a bridge. I think really there is no bridge, and I think we need to build a bridge. And that's part of the reason why I wrote my book. It's part of the reason why I do my podcast, is because I'm trying to give people on either side of that chasm a way to reach out. And just to kind of repeat myself a little bit, I think it's about having the right vocabulary. It's about creating a conversation about cyber risk management, and then more importantly, sustaining that conversation. And so I tell people with my book, a great use case for my book is if you're a financial professional and you're trying to have a good conversation with an IT person or a cybersecurity person about this topic, you could read part 1 of my book and then give it to that person and say, I just read part 1. I want you to read part 1 because I saw some stuff in there that I'd like to talk with you about. I saw a couple of stories and a couple of ideas that I think could work for us. So would you read part one, and then let's talk about it, because I'd like your perspective. Now, that I think is the beginning of a bridge. It's kind of a rope bridge, but you know, it'll get you going. And now you could choose something other than my book, of course, but I absolutely wrote my book for that. That one podcast episode, 112, maybe listen to that. And then if the person you're trying to communicate with likes podcasts, you could say, hey, listen to this episode, because there's some stuff in there I want to talk with you about. So that would be a good way to kick a conversation off, I think.
I know that there was some questions about cybersecurity insurance, and you have some really great recent episodes on cybersecurity insurance.
We do, yeah. Yeah, we absolutely do. And I'd be happy to share specific episodes and what you could learn from them. You know, we actually have people from the cyber insurance industry, brokers, people who work at the carriers. We've talked with the Chief Information Security Officer at Corvus, which is an insurance technology company that that's writing policies. And I thought he did a good job of giving some real insights into what it is they're looking for versus what they're actually seeing, and kind of how to close that gap.
Well, thank you guys so much for this. This was very informative for me anyway.
Great.
I look forward to the book. I'm going to actually just email Lisa now. Looking forward to getting a copy of that. Reading that, because I think that'll help a lot.